right, so welcome everyone. My name is Michael Dickens. I am the curator and gallery director of the New Gallery at Austin Peay State University, and I'm also the chair of the Visiting Artist Speaker Series. Tonight's event is brought to you by Austin Peay State University's Department of Art and Design and CECA, which is the Center of Excellence for the Creative Arts. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Yuchi, Shawnee, and Cherokee First Nations, on which we are learning, organizing, and broadcasting today. So I'd like to formally welcome all of you and thank you for joining us for this evening's portion of the 2020, 21, that's a lot of 20s, CECA Visiting Artist Speaker Series. And it's an honor to be able to share our renowned programming with the rest of the world. I know many of you are not affiliated with Austin Peay, so we thank you for being here. I think at the last count, we have over 103 people in here joining us, so thank you, thank you, thank you. So for those people who are not affiliated with Austin Peay, please follow us on social media, the APSU Art and Design and/or CECA, to keep tabs on what we're doing here. We have a lot of great programming, so we're glad you're here with us. This process, what we're going to do is we're going to take some question and answer at the end, and we're not going to use the chat. We're going to use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So feel free to actually write your questions as we go along, and then we'll kind of moderate at the end. So let me introduce tonight's speaker. I'm going to keep this introduction brief because you didn't join us from everywhere to hear me talk, right? You came to hear this evening's guest, which is Debbie Millman. So Debbie Millman is a rock star, super rock star. Not only is she an award-winning graphic designer, she's also an author of 6 books, the founder and host of Design Matters, which is one of the world's first and longest running podcasts, and winner of a 2011 Cooper Hewitt National Design Award. Co-founder of the world's first graduate program in branding at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where her and her students created Branding for MoMA's retail program. She's president emeritus of AIGA and a frequent speaker on design and branding at venues all around the world, and was recently named as one of the top 10 TED Talks of 2020. So congratulations, Debbie. So yeah, please give a warm welcome that we can't hear you clapping. But we know you are clapping. So please welcome Debbie Millman.
Everyone, thank you so much. It is really nice to be here, and I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. What a strange, strange time we're living in. I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to be presenting a somewhat new lecture. It's a build of my TED Talk, which has as you've heard, it did really well last year, but it's something that needs to continue to evolve because it's really a monitoring of our times. And so I'm going to share my screen, and I have some notes because it's all very new. A lot of the new stuff is still new, and I'm not fully memorized it yet. So, okay, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to get started. Okay. So 13.8 billion years ago, our universe was created, and it created everything that we know and are made of. About 4.5 billion years ago, our little blue dot formed. And now, in 2021, nearly 8 billion people live on this planet. We have 195 countries, 4,200 religions. We are a planet that houses 8.5 million species. We are one of 8.7 million species. We have, as a culture, We've created 1.5 million significant brands just in this moment, not even over time, but just in this moment, we have 1.5 million significant brands. We are currently home to 10 wars. There are 10 wars happening right now on our planet. 17 armed conflicts. So how did we get here? How did we get here? 13.8 billion years ago is when it all started. And 50,000 years ago, our brains underwent a major genetic mutation, which resulted in a biological reorganization of our brain. And some scientists call this the Big Brain Bang. And others call it the Great Leap Forward. This is when Homo sapiens began to evolve into the modern species that we currently are today. And the Great Leap Forward activated so many of our modern abilities. We now call those cultural universals, and they include abstract thought, planning, cooperative labor, music, cooking, self-decoration. And after the Great Leap Forward, there was a major explosion in our development of stone tool making, more sophisticated weaponry. And 32,000 years ago, we created mark makings on the walls of Lascaux. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we've gone from documenting our reality on the walls of caves to documenting our reality on the walls of Facebook. And in a very meta experience, you can now book a trip to see the walls of Lascaux on the walls of Facebook. Kind of love that. Approximately 10,000 years ago, men and women began self-decorating by arraying themselves with makeup. But this was not for seductive purposes. This was inspired by religious convictions. We wanted to be cleaner and purer and more beautiful in the eyes of someone or something that we believed had more power than we did, someone who we revered. And in fact, there is no culture in recorded history that has not practiced some form of organized worship, which we now call religion. So 6,000 years ago, in an effort to unite people, our ancestors very cleverly began to design telegraphic symbols. They were created to represent our beliefs, and they allowed us to feel safer and more secure in groups. And these symbols connected us. They allowed us to telegraphically know if we believed the same things. And this sharing created consensus around what the symbols represented. And with these marks, you knew where you fit in, both for the people who were part of the in crowd, just telegraphically you could tell, or for those who were excluded. And these symbols are what were created in what I call, what I've deemed a very bottom-up manner. They were made by people, for people, and were shared for free among people in honor of the higher power and in honor of the power that they ascribe to. What's ironic is that this higher power really had nothing to do with it. You know, they didn't weigh in on the quality of the design of that mark. They didn't share it with focus groups to weigh in on whether it was working or not. It was developed, it was shared. If you believed in it, you accepted it, you extolled it, you wore it, you honored it. Now, these symbols have evolved over thousands of years, but they share identical qualities, no matter where we were over the course of our history, no matter where we were on the planet, no matter how scattered we were, no matter how seemingly different we were, or even the different ideas and beliefs that we had, there are some really, really interesting commonalities. No matter what religion we followed, we all manufactured symbolic logos. We all built environments for worship. So we went to a different place to be able to pray. We developed strict rules and regulations about how to engage with each other, with the way we ate, with the way we dealt with our hair, with birth, with death, with marriage and procreation. It's interesting that we all, no matter where we are now, have some sort of ring to signify that we belong to someone else. And there are also some really eerie commonalities in the way that we use symbology. So for example, we all seem to use the hand of God, and it shows up over and over again. It showed up as the Hamsa hand in Mesopotamia. It showed up as the hand of Fatima in Islam, the hand of Miriam in Judaism, and the hand of Mary in Christianity. Sorry, I mispronounced that. When we didn't agree on whose beliefs and behaviors were the correct ones, we fought. Many of our first wars were religious, and flags were created on the battlefield to signify which side to fight on, because it would be several millennia before we could mass manufacture branded uniforms. And this was the only way we would be able to tell friend from foe. There would be no telegraphic way of just looking at each other without being able to signify which side we belonged on. So there was a flag, we were on that side, sort of like tennis. We stayed on that side of the court if we were on that team, and then we would fight by joining forward in the middle. Now we have logos on mass manufactured uniforms. Those flags appear on uniforms to be able to signify what side we believe in. Logos on products to identify a marker and a maker came next. And brands were first given legal recognition on January 1st, 1876, with the introduction of the Trademarks Registration Act. The very first brand that was given a trademark was Bass Ale. And I often wonder what that means about our humanity, that the first trademarked brand in the United States wasn't an American brand and was an alcoholic beverage. Now I want to show you the first case, the first recorded case of branded product placement. Here are bottles of Bass Ale with their logo accurately represented. You can see it in both the lower left and the lower right side of this slide. And this is a famous 1882 painting by the French Impressionist Edward Manet. So the Trademark Registration Act fundamentally changed our relationship to and with brands and our perception, understanding, and use of marks and logos. One of the most widely recognized logos in the world today is this one, the Nike swoosh, which was introduced in 1971. Caroline Davidson was a student, graphic design student, and she created this logo at the University of Portland for $35. And when the Nike CEO, Phil Knight, first saw it, he said, "I don't love it, but maybe it will grow on me." I love that. Maybe it'll grow on me. Don't worry, she's been made whole. She was given Nike stock many years later, so she came out okay. But the big question here is, why is this logo so popular? Why is it so well recognized? Is it the mark itself? Is it the beauty and splendor and magnificence of this mark? Or is it the marketing? And what can we make of the fact, if we really analyze the aesthetics of this mark itself, of the shape, what can we make of the fact that it also seems to be the Newport Cigarettes logo, albeit upside down, and the Capital One logo on the side? So that's not the only logo in all of my research. It's not the only logo that I've found that has a shared identity, but has wholly different meanings. So it is what we've projected into it that makes all the difference in the world, not necessarily the aesthetics of the mark themselves. So as a Jewish woman and a human on this planet, I believe that the swastika is the most heinous logo of all time. But I learned in my research that it has a really surprising evolution. The word swastika itself actually comes from the Sanskrit word svastika. And that word actually means well-being, good fortune, and luck. That is the origin of the word. In the early 1900s, before it was appropriated by Hitler, the mark was actually used, believe it or not, by Coca-Cola. And this is a good luck bottle opener that they created and they manufactured in 1910. The American Biscuit Company prominently printed the swastika on boxes of cookies. The US Playing Card Company registered the mark in 1921 for fortune playing cards. The Boy Scouts used the mark in 1910 as well, and it was featured on road signs, on whiskey, on beer, and stamps and cigar wrappers. Even the Jane made use of the logo along with their own hand of God many, many millennia ago. So these marks were identical, but with use as a Nazi symbol, the impact became very, very different. In the eyes of Steve Heller, this is now a mark beyond redemption. But its history and its origins are very different from what it ended up being. So the hand of God, the Nike swoosh, and the swastika. They all demonstrate how we have been manufacturing meaning with visuals over millennia. It's a behavior that's really as old as we are. Now, today, in the United States, there are over 116,000 malls, and they all kind of look exactly the same. We might not be able to go to as many as we used to, but they still very, very much look like this. This is the United States, but it's not just the United States that they look the same. They become homogenized everywhere. This is South Africa. This is Berlin. This is China. In the United States, there are more than 40,000 supermarkets containing over 40,000 items. If you went shopping for bottled water, you'd have more than 80 options to choose from. Since their launch in 1912, you could choose from over 100 flavors and variants of Oreo cookies. Now, the question is, I think, obvious. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Is a plethora of choice necessary, required in a free market? So it's a question I've been pondering for probably as many years as my career has been going on. And ultimately, I have an answer that will probably satisfy no one, but it's an honest and sincere one. I think it's a good and a bad thing. As humans are both good and bad, and we're the ones that are creating and using and buying into these brands. Now, one other area of research that I've been spending time examining is the use of logos for anti-branders. So I found that even the anti-branders of branding are using the very tenets of branding that they vehemently disdain. This is an ad for Adbusters. Adbusters is a anti-capitalist site, and they've created a sneaker that they call the Black Spot, the Unswoosher. And this is a sneaker that's being used to raise money on their website. So they have a logo, they have a website, they have these branded products now. So even the anti-branders are using the tenets of branding that they so vehemently object to and disdain. So I think the question of whether this behavior is good or bad is really secondary to why. Why do we behave like this in the first place? What is it that has us continuing to use these behaviors for the last 10,000 years? So here's the thing. Every one of these mass marketed products, whether they be brands or anti-brands, are what I consider to be top-down brands. So in our past, our religious symbols were created bottom-up. They were created by us, for us. They were distributed for free in an effort to connect people. Now, what we're seeing in the commercialized use of brands, they're very top-down, and they are owned and operated and, let me go back. They're owned and operated. Well, it's not letting me go back, but so I'm just going to tell you that they're owned and operated and manufactured and advertised and designed and promoted and distributed by the corporation and pushed down and sold to the consumer for financial gain. These corporations have a responsibility. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders through a P&L with an expectation of a return on investment, and they're controlled by companies like P&G and AT&T and J&J. And that's pretty much the way it's been for the last couple of 100 years. A top-down model controlled by the corporation. Until 2011. And in 2011, we started to see the beginnings of real, significant, far-reaching change. It started with a bang and then has continued to grow and evolve as we continue to grow and evolve, and our use of technology continues to grow and evolve. So in 2011, we saw the Arab Spring and Occupy Wall Street prove how social media could amplify messages and connect like-minded people with powerful beliefs to inspire change. We witnessed a cultural shift on social media with hashtags like Me Too and Black Lives Matter. And in its wake, the discipline of branding has transformed more in the last 10 years than it has in the last 10,000. The most popular, influential brands are not being pushed down by the corporation, but they are being pushed up by the people, for the people, for the sole purpose of changing the world and making it a better place. And so now what we're seeing as our greatest innovations, they're not brands providing a different form or a different flavor of our favorite snack. Our greatest innovations are the creations of brands that reflect the kind of world that we want to live in. So we began to see a volumetric shift in the way that brands were created and used in 2016. In 2016, Krista Suh, Jana Zweiman, and Kat Coyle, they created a little hat. They created a hat to be worn at the Women's March in Washington, D.C., a day after the presidential inauguration. 2 months later, on January 21st, 2017, millions of people all over the world wore handmade pink pussy hats in support of the Women's March. This took just a matter of months. What took years and years and years to build brand equity in the past now was condensed into this moment where within 2.5 months, millions of people were wearing the hat all over the world to signify the same belief. So like our religious symbols created thousands of years ago, the hat was created by the people, for the people, created for free to serve what I now believe is branding's highest power. To unite people in the communication of shared ideals. This is what I believe branding's highest power and potential is and can continue to be. So the pussy hat became a global mark for a movement. And in a very short time, 2 months, it became universally recognizable. This is Amsterdam. It connected audiences in an unprecedented way. And it is a brand, but it is also more than that. It's more than a brand. I believe that today, the tenets of branding are helping to change the world in profound ways that we never imagined back in 2013, when the movement of Black Lives Matter began with a hashtag. It began with the use of a hashtag in 2013 on social media after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the shooting death of the African-American teenager Trayvon Martin. Just a few months earlier in 2012, the movement became nationally recognized for street demonstrations following the 2014 deaths of 2 African Americans, Michael Brown and in Ferguson and Eric Garner in New York City. Now the movement has a globally recognized mark and a symbol and protest posters, and after the killing of George Floyd, a recognizable statement of despair, which was also made into a poster, and masks in the street as we protest in the time of COVID. We're using the symbols and the methodologies the way citizens want to use them, not corporations. So today, right now, I believe that branding is a profound manifestation of the human spirit. The condition of branding has always, I believe, reflected the condition of our culture. We just haven't recognized it yet. We haven't realized it, and we haven't fully utilized its power until now. So I believe as designers, it is our responsibility to leverage the democratic power that branding provides. And it is our responsibility, and it is my hope that as the makers and markers of culture today, that we can design a culture that reflects and honors the kind of world we want to live in, and we want to all live in together. So thank you. That is my little presentation for today. It's my ongoing body of research about how I believe branding has the power to change the world and how designers have the biggest opportunity to do that.
Wow, thank you so much, Debbie. I've got a question that was sent to me before. If anyone has a question, please type it in the Q&A, then I can kind of moderate from there. While you're doing that, I had a question.
Yes.
And you talked about 2011 and the Arab Spring uprising. And I distinctly remember staying up all night and actually watched the revolution on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, right? Just to see it happen in real time, and the change. And I've been really aware of the changes since. You'd mentioned about, you know, the power of the marks for social change, and that traditionally it's been from the top down, from corporations. Do you see? I'm reading over here because I wrote it down. Do you see a future shift back where we have the shift now from the bottom up, right? Is what you're talking about. Do you
Mhm.
see a shift back to the top down? Now I'm thinking of like the corporate use of influencers, right? So the recognition of there's people that are of the people, but if we pay them a little money, they can say this brand is awesome, and then it becomes of the people when it's a corporate push. Do you see that
Well,
having a big shift, or?
I do, but it's not one that I feel is meaningful.
Right.
Because anytime you pay someone to do something, it changes the sincerity and the authenticity of that act. And, you know, this whole notion of influencers, while it is something that seems to be really prevalent right now, I think we end up on a really slippery slope when we think about personal branding.
Mhm.
And you know, somebody said to me today, in a business setting, "Oh, please don't take this personally." And without really thinking about it, I said, "How can I not? I'm a person." You know?
Right.
And it felt like a really revelatory sort of epiphany for me to consider the possibility that as people, we take everything personally because we're all people. And in relation to branding, brands, as I think I've discussed them here, brands are manufactured. Brands don't live on their own. Brands always need somebody to direct them. The ones that are created by people have to be directed by people. So they're manufactured. It's a construct we all believe in. We believe the Nike swoosh because of the advertising and the marketing around it.
Mhm.
Humans are alive. Humans have a consciousness. We're messy. We don't always tell the truth. We change our minds from day to day. Some days we feel good, some days we feel bad. Sometimes we feel pretty, sometimes we feel fat, sometimes we feel conflicted. Those are not attributes that brands should have. Brands are a symbol of consistency and quality. So the moment a person aspires to be a brand, it sucks their humanity out of them. And while people still might be able to evolve and change as brands, it doesn't allow for the humanity and the nuanced behavior to really allow to be shown. And so I have real issues with anybody that aspires to be a brand. You can own a brand and you can direct a brand and you can operate a brand, but it's very different than being a brand. Because once you're a brand, it's like being a paper cutout of a person. And so I have issues with that. For the corporations that hire people to be influencers or to represent the brand, it's no different really than hiring an advertising agency or hiring somebody to create a message for you to then share. And that's really all the influencers are doing. So it's really no different than pushing it down into culture via the use of some sort of marketing campaign. I
Right.
think that the moment you add a financial component to that equation, it changes the authenticity of that equation. And
Right.
so pushing down to me feels like the way to create a relationship that isn't in any way about changing belief or behavior authentically through the notion of shared ideas.
Right. One of the questions in the chat, or in the Q&A, kind of tags along with this one. So what do you think about the epidemic of corporations on Twitter doing clapbacks, roasts, and responding to their customers? Is this a sign of more of a bottoms-up marketing that's happening in 2011, or something else entirely?
So can you ask the first part of the question again? It's a big question. It's a great
Right.
question. I have to wrap
Right.
my head around it.
So what do you think about the epidemic of corporations on Twitter doing clapbacks, roasts, and responding to their customers?
So I think that's all part of marketing, and I think that that's great. It's very different though than using branding to change the way that we behave in culture as humans that have certain beliefs that we feel are more just, and using branding to create a more just world. When Oreos tweeted during the Super Bowl several years ago when we had the blackout, that was genius. That was a way to connect with people in a very witty, whimsical, unexpected, surprising way. And brands really are always balancing a continuum of recognized behavior and surprising behavior. And if it's too surprising, then people get really angry. If they think the logo is too far away from where it was, people respond. People hated the way that the Airbnb logo was evolving, and people hated the way that I believe it was Squarespace. They thought that it looked like a swastika. If it's got that sort of perfect place, that Goldilocks place where it's both surprising and recognizable, then people really like it. And in the case of Oreos, it was Oreo talking about behavior that we all knew and loved, dunking, and doing it in a surprising way. And so people loved it. And I think that's really clever. And I think it's wonderful. And I really have nothing against brands branding, because that's what they're supposed to do. Haters are going to hate, branders are going to brand. I don't think there's anything wrong with brands using branding to reach their customers. But I do have issues when they pretend to be part of something or believe in something or posture themselves to be able to convey something that they do because of popular opinion. And I think it's much more significant when brands take a stand and risk doing something because of trying to portray a more just world than when they just get on the bandstand. Every brand now is now utilizing rainbow devices during Gay Pride Month. Where were they 10 years ago when that was slightly more risky to do?
Yeah, and the black square, right, for Instagram and Facebook, and like with museums
Yeah.
about representing people of color. We support you, but then they haven't done the
Right.
background
And it
structure.
becomes really easy to be a Twitter activist or a Facebook activist without really taking responsibility and learning about what behavior you could take. Yes, you can be supportive, but you need to be more than just supportive. You need to be able to represent that change in your behavior.
Right.
And so these gestures become representative as opposed to heartfelt.
Right. Well, there's a lot of questions coming in, so I'm trying to.
I love questions. I love questions.
Trying to parse them. These are two different questions, two different people, but they I want to put those together. So the first one, then a little personal. Have you participated in any of the marches and movements in person? What feelings did it summon? How did it impact your research as a participant? And I'm going to pair that with another one that says, what inspires and or influences your work? Because it kind of seemed, I'm making a personal judgment from what you said, but I pair those together.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I have participated in a number of different marches, and I've really been doing that since I just had this, just brought back this memory of being in elementary school. And I don't even remember what the students were protesting, but I had a big sign that I made and I was protesting, and they took the reporters in the little town I lived in Northport, took a photo of me, and I was in the newspaper. So, and I was super excited because there I was, holding my sign and being all radical. And yet, it's now I'm 60. So this was when I was like 12 or 13. And so I don't remember what we were protesting. But yes, and I think that the feeling that I get when being part of something bigger than myself is something that is unreplicable. And I remember even, being part of AIGA and going to conferences and feeling like I was part of this group that all believed the same things. I remember when I was first writing for Speak Up back in 2004, 2005, feeling like I was part of something that had more meaning than anything that I was doing individually or independently. And somehow something I was doing had impact or had some purpose to it beyond just my own personal needs. It made me feel stronger. It made me feel prouder. I've walked in gay pride marches. I walked in the Women's March. All of those things have fueled my sense of what's right in the world.
Well, I'm going to follow that up with, because I know a lot of our students are undergrads, or I mean, all of our students are undergrad. I'm thinking of a lot of people in this session might be undergrads, and beginning graphic designers. I would presume that you would be in a position as a designer to turn down work for companies or clients that you didn't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
How did you approach that in the beginning as a designer that was starting out that wanted to take possibly everything?
Okay, so that's a really, really great question. And I have a somewhat complicated answer to it, because I recognize that there are different people that are willing to do different work. And certainly a lot of people have been motivated by Milton Glaser's 12 Steps to Hell article about the kinds of questions we should ask ourselves about what we do. I came from nothing. I had, when I was growing up, no money. I went to a state school. I went to public schools and state schools. And when I graduated, I had, I didn't know about internships, and I had no connections, and I had no way of navigating through the sort of big world of advertising and design in New York City. It was very much my first decade out of school, and I'm going to talk a lot about this tomorrow in my presentation. That first decade is what I call experiments in rejection and failure.
Right.
And even in the kind of people that I was working with. So I remember one of my very first freelance jobs was at a computer magazine. And the art director that I was working for, and this was in the mid 80s, you could only work with him in the morning, because after lunch he was really drunk. It was back in the day of those Mad Men 4 martini lunches. And I remember thinking at the time that, this, to me, it felt like the definition of hell, having to go through something like that. But I had no alternative. I didn't have any money. I couldn't just quit because there was another job waiting for me, and I could make a living doing something else instantly. I needed to be able to pay my rent. And so you found yourself inadvertently in compromising positions because you didn't always have an alternative. So that's just one example. Ultimately, I did find another job, and no harm came to me through that experience other than some psychological harm. It wasn't like any physical harm or any sexual harassment in that case, although there were other times where I did have to literally fend off certain people that I was working with because there were no real boundaries back then.
Right.
But then as I started to evolve, one of the big issues that I had in, I want to say, the late 90s, this was already when I was the president at Sterling. I had a big staff. We had 150 people, and we got an opportunity to do multi-million dollars worth of business with a cigarette company. At the time, I smoked. At the time, most of my colleagues smoked. And so for us, it really wasn't a moral decision. It was, wow, we're going to get to work on some of the most iconic brands in the world, Camel being one of them. And we're going to get paid really, really well, which is going to mean that we can pay our employees really, really well. And we did it. Now, do I look back on that and regret it? I do. I really do. You know, since quitting, it's also many, many, many years later, I feel very, very guilty about it. I feel bad about what we did. But at the time, we needed the money and we made the decision that we made. I feel like I can't judge people who have to make certain compromises about what they do if they need to survive.
Right.
And do I think that people should work on things that harm or kill people? No, I really don't. Um, so I think everybody has to make their own decisions about what they're willing to do based on how they have to take care of themselves and what their family requires.
Right. Right.
So that's a complicated answer.
Yeah, but it's you know, I've kind of dealt with that in some of my own issues. Like, do I work with certain clients that I don't agree with? Am I in a position to say no?
Right.
And
And
that's
I'm
the
in a
hardest
position
part
to
of
say
me.
no now. You know, I'm going
Right.
to be 60 this year. I can say no to whoever I want to say no to. You know, I've been working since 1983. After all
Right.
these decades, thankfully, I'm in a position where I can say, don't want to do that.
Right.
And part of the reason I've set up my life the way I do now is because I've done enough. I've made enough restaurant fast food logos. I've made enough carbonated soft drink logos. I've worked on enough over-the-counter pharmaceuticals. I've seen how it all works. I've seen the underbelly of it all. And that's also why I've committed myself now to working with nonprofits, to working with companies that I do feel are making a difference. But I can also look at all the behavior around me and say, I know what you're doing there. I know what that really is about. So, you know, I'm lucky in that respect. I do see one question that I do want to answer
Oh, go
because
right ahead.
it's really close to my heart, and it's
Yeah, if you
something
see
I'm
any
really
of these
proud
that you want to take on,
of.
you please go
So
ahead.
Sarah Jones asked, did I create all of the graphics to my presentation? And yes, I
That
did.
was my next question.
Oh, good, 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 good.
No,
Yeah, I
great,
did all the drawings myself.
great. So then I'll skip ahead. So this one's not on the Q&A. This was sent to me earlier this week. So this is from an alumnus, I guess, of Austin P, who has their own graphic design studio and is currently working on an MFA in graphic design at Vermont College of Fine Art. Learning and loving a lot about writing. So they're curious about your writing process, and do you have any routines, rituals, processes you do when you write, or any advice, tips, do's, don'ts working with editors?
So I'm not sure who asked this question, but it's almost like you went into my mind to look at all the things that I'm grappling with at the moment. So I have a book coming out in the fall, and it's supposed to be called Why Design Matters, and it is an anthology of interviews with some of my best guests and most amazing creative people in the world. And it has been, and I know we're recording this, so maybe this can come out at some point and be edited out, but it's been one of the most brutal experiences of my life, brutal professional experiences of my life. I can't even begin to tell you how hard it was for me to just get the energy through a global pandemic to come up with original thinking for this book. And yes, it is very much a collection of interviews that already happened, but the way that I organized them and the way that I edited them and the way I had to introduce them all required some really deep thinking and writing. And ultimately, I went kicking and screaming into the process. There were a lot of projectile tears, a lot of talks with my therapist, and then finally just sitting my butt down in a chair and not letting myself get up until I wrote what I needed to write. Either that or return the advance.
So,
and lose the opportunity for this book to be made. So I didn't want that.
when is the book scheduled to come? When is it scheduled to come out?
October of
October.
2021. But
Okay.
that was after a year delay because
Right.
of my procrastination and my inability to get past my writer's block. I think writer's block generally means you just don't want to do it. And that I had to contend with. And it was like, do I want to go through this arduous process of writing this? And the answer was no. But do I also want this book to come out in the world? And the answer was yes. So I had to really reconcile my feelings about not wanting to do it with my feelings that it needed to be done. That
Right.
was hard. That was hard. Like I said, I try not to do any work now that I don't want to do for clients, but I still have to do work that I don't want to do for myself.
So October 21st, everyone's going to expect your book.
No, October 2021. I don't know.
Oh,
The
20, not 21st. Okay, October of, okay, this
And I'm
October.
happy to come back and do a Q&A at that time if you want me to as
We would
well.
love to have you, of
Yeah,
course.
that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and pencil that in. End of October.
And I'm also happy to answer questions for as long as you want. I know this is scheduled for an hour, but I'm happy to go over because it
I'm
does seem
fine.
like there are a
I'm
lot
fine
of
too.
good ones.
There's a lot of questions. So during the pandemic, right? So you're home. You're still doing the podcast, right?
Yes.
So this question is like, could you share a little bit about how you got your podcast started and what it was like to be on the bleeding edge of that communication platform?
Thank you. That's a great question. I didn't intend for my show, Design Matters with Debbie Millman, to be a podcast. Because when I started coming up with the idea for it, which was in November of 2004, I didn't even know the word podcast existed. And at that time, there were the word itself, I think, had been in existence for maybe 6 months or something like that. I've always tended to be very late to things, not early. And so what was happening was, as I mentioned, that first decade of my career were experiments in rejection and failure. So all through my 20s, it was just rejection after rejection after rejection. Grad school, jobs, opportunities, significant others, you name it, I experienced it. And then quite by chance, it was really, I took a job in branding because I couldn't get a job that I wanted in design. And I was a business development person, and suddenly, quite by accident, realized that I was very good at selling branding programs. I don't know if it was because I grew up, as the daughter of a pharmacist who owned his own general store, and I was always working on the weekends and during the summers selling, or if it was just some innate talent, my own fascination with brands and products, but I was very good at it. And I did that for a couple of years at Interbrand, and then went to Sterling, where whatever talent I had already started to build exploded. So I went to Sterling in 1995. And for the first time in my life, I was really good at something, and I knew it. And because it was the first time I ever felt like I was good at something, I just wanted to do it all the time. It's like I just gave everything else up, all my writing, all my drawing, all the things that I had always done to be creative, the things that I wanted to pursue for my life's work. I gave that up because it was like, oh my God, I'm successful. I'm making money. This is amazing. I'm going to do it all the time and just feel like a success all the time instead of the failure that I felt like.
Right.
And that worked for like 8 or 9 years. And then I started to feel like I was really losing my creative soul. And I'm going to talk a lot about this in the class that I'm in tomorrow. And so I got an opportunity I had started writing for Speak Up at that point, and I had gotten an opportunity. I got a cold call from a fledgling internet radio network that asked me if I wanted to host a radio show on branding. And I thought they were offering me a job. I thought they were offering me a chance to be a radio host where they would hire me and pay me. But what I quickly realized was, no, that wasn't it at all. They were pitching for me to hire them as producers of a radio show that they would host on their site. So it was really a vanity gig. But at the time, I thought, well, I could ask my clients I can interview my clients, I can interview my design friends. I sort of persuaded them to let me do a show about design and branding, not just branding. And so they let me use the name Design Matters. And the show started as a live radio show on the Voice America Business Network in February of 2005, February 4th. So I'm coming up on 16 years.
Wow.
And for the first 4 years, it was a radio show, a live radio show on Voice America. In I think June or July of that year, maybe April. I don't really remember what month it was. Brian E. Gomez Palacio, one of the writers on Speak Up, was like, you should post these to iTunes. So this way people don't have to only be listening to them live, because it was recorded live. I had a live studio audience, not studio, a live audience. People would call in with questions, and then it would rerun one time during the week at like 3 a.m. And so if you weren't available near there wasn't any iPhones at the time. There wasn't an iPod. There was just your computer. If you weren't in front of your computer at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Fridays, couldn't listen to the show. So Brian was like, why don't you take that file and upload it to iTunes like an indie musician, and then people can listen to it whenever they want. And so that was why inadvertently it became one of the world's first podcasts. Wow. I remember there was Apple did a chart of like the top 100 podcasts, and I was number 85. And I think it was because there were only 100 podcasts at that time. And I still have it. I still have that clip. I'll show it tomorrow. The screenshot of being number 85. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. The number 85 podcast.
Right.
And so I've just been doing it ever since. And it's something that I've loved doing. 4 years later, I went and hired a producer. I moved the show to Design Observer, and I was exclusively there until the end of 2020. The TED.com, the conferences are starting an audio collective, and they invited me to be part of that. So now I'm doing that, but it's still my independent show.
Right.
So yeah.
That's great. We'll have to thank Bryony because actually
Longer
Bryony
than any relationship I've ever had.
Bryony was one of our CECA visiting artists a few years ago.
Oh yeah, she's one of my best friends in the world.
Phenomenal. I'm gonna here's a question that I'm going to ask, but then I'm gonna ask in a different way.
Okay.
So, what are some logos you believe have made the largest impact to humanity in recent times? So I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you for your top 5.
Top 5 logos that have changed.
That you have impact on humanity.
Well, so this isn't going to be whether or not I like them. It's just logos that have impacted humanity.
Fair enough.
Okay. Well, certainly the hand of God, as I mentioned, because that's been used everywhere. The Catholic, the crucifix. And it's really interesting. I interviewed Massimo Vignelli, I guess 2006, and the interviews in my book, How to Think Like a Great Graphic Designer. It's the last interview because it's the best one. And I asked him if he could redesign anything, what would it be? And he said, the Catholic Church, but we could keep the crucifix. That's a good logo. So I think definitely the crucifix, the Nike swoosh, the swastika, and now probably the hashtag sign.
Oh, the hashtag itself.
Yeah.
The pound sign.
Is that
I just dated myself, right? The pound sign.
Yeah, the pound sign. So I think that's so the hand of God, the crucifix, the Nike swoosh, the swastika, and the pound sign.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna. I got maybe time for one more. I'm gonna ask.
No, I'm happy to. Unless you have to go, I'm happy to answer.
No, I don't have to go, but I know there's more than we probably have time for. So, I have the list of people who signed up. Is it possible for me to get their questions and send them to you?
Yeah.
Then you
can set up another Zoom call and answer them. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Let's see here. How do you balance your professional work with personal projects?
With great difficulty. One of the things that I've had to grapple with, and I've had to grapple with this for what's going on decades now, is my fear that any opportunity might be the last opportunity that I ever get. And so I've said yes to a lot of things over the course of my life that I said yes to because I thought, oh, I'll never get this opportunity again. So like even my first book, which I'm thrilled and proud of having done, but the title had to think like a great graphic designer. It's not the title I would have chosen. And if I wasn't as worried about losing the opportunity, I would have pushed back more. I didn't think I had that right at the time. And so there are still lots of things that I tend to do because I don't want to disappoint someone, or because I'm a people pleaser, or because I think I'm obligated to do something. And so it's very hard. I really respect the people that have good boundaries. I don't have good boundaries. There are no boundaries. I have no boundaries. And so that's something that I really do grapple with. And I worry because I think, my time, I don't want to sound really dire or nihilistic, but if not now, when? So I have to really I've been really, really working on trying to say yes only to the things that I really, really want to do. And it's hard.
Right. Well, with that, I'm going to kind of wrap it up. I know a couple questions, people had questions if the video is going to be available. Yes, once I get this and edit and put our branding on it, on the video, I'll post it. So be sure to follow us on social media, APSU Art Design or CECA. It'll be linked through there. So I am going to copy a lot of the questions that we didn't get to, and I'll send them to you, and then maybe you can answer them, and then I can parse them out to everyone else.
Yeah, or what we can also do is do just a Zoom for you and me, and then I can, you can ask me the questions, and we can have a conversation, tape it, and then send it to everybody, or invite the people that are here to join us back. I'm very happy to do that.
I like having that conversation.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah,
You're a good interviewer, Michael.
What was that?
You're a good interviewer.
Well, thanks. I was kind of nervous because I've been listening to your podcast, and you have great interviews with such thoughtful questions. And yeah, I was kind of a little gun shy on this one, but this is great. This has been awesome. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I know we're right in the heart of this pandemic when everyone is zoomed out, but occasionally these things they're just fun to sit in and learn some stuff. I know the students are excited to talk to you tomorrow, as well as our professors.
Thank you.
I may or may not hop in. I don't know. Pull rank. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming out. Please follow us on social media or sign up for our email list. We have a great lineup this year. We have another 7 artist talks this semester alone. So it's a crazy semester, but it's great because everyone we have is phenomenal. Debbie, it was such a pleasure. I was a fan before. I'm a bigger fan now.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
And
thank you for inviting me. And for everybody that's listening, Michael and I have been in communication now for probably a year and a half.
Yeah, a long time.
Because of everything that's happening. And he's just been wonderful in making this happen.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to edit that out and put it at the beginning of the video. All right. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.